So I'm actually calling from a university in Japan, Tokyo University of Agriculture, or Nodai, as they call themselves. So Nodai is a very famous university for agricultural research in Japan. It's one of the top ones in the country, and they've been very kind to us in the last 3 years, helping us develop our latest RedEdge-P series of cameras. So I'd just like to start by saying thank you very much. I'm currently in the Zemi-10, the lab of Professor Okazawa. I'm on here being assisted by two very handsome gentlemen here who are, I believe, are postgrad students at the company. Not to bury the lead, we're going to talk about harvest today. So although everyone uses multispectral cameras commonly for mid-season and early season applications, I'm interested specifically in harvest time, the picking of when we do harvest, and what the consequences are of a poorly managed harvest, and how we hope that we can help in the near future. Post-harvest waste in fruits, vegetables, and grains can run up to about 30 or 40, even 40% of the yield that's been taken by the grower at the time. So obviously, to start off with, it's 10% actually picking, and that could be because some sort of issue with the harvesting technique, or it could be because the crop is old and can't stand being pulled out of the ground, for example. And of course, we have transport and storage. Again, if the crop is old and it's soft, it's liable to bruising, a number of other issues. And then finally, of course, we've got retail, where the greatest loss occurs when the crop might actually get to the market or might get to the supermarket, but a certain percentage of that crop is old, or it could actually be underdeveloped. So,
not share this.
That's fine. No
Okay,
problem.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So we sort of brought it down to two different parts. We believe that there's two items that need to be addressed, really, to try and reduce this 40% wastage. First of all, being better crop uniformity. So we want to make sure that all the crops in a field or in a particular section that customers are hoping to pick at any one time is all very uniform, so that everything in the box that gets to the customer is of the same sort of quality. And then the second part would be the harvest timing, which is probably where we're going to lean into a little bit today. This is just an illustration, really. I'm not sure we can see it very well, but this is an AI generated image, I'm afraid, guys. But this is 12 ripe, probably okay pears for sticking on a supermarket shelf. But you might be able to see there in the middle there, there's some green pears which may or may not be considered to be acceptable at the place where they've been purchased from. And then towards the left there, you can see some rather old, manky looking pears there. They may have been bruised, or they may just actually be too old. In this particular case, we're looking at about, I think that's like about a 60% yield. So, oh, sorry, can you see my presentation at the moment, guys?
No, we can't. Sorry, we can't see it.
Okay, hold on a sec. Hold on.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
That's much better. Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay. So, I should just show you very quickly the other previous screens then, I suppose. Sorry about this. So I was just saying, this is Nordai, and this is the loss that people can expect for a crop between picking the crops and getting them onto the shelves and getting to someone's refrigerator. And we're talking about better crop uniformity, better harvest timing is probably going to be key. And if you can see the last screen there, you've got some pears in a box. The previous one was about uniformity, and we'll talk about uniformity in a second. But the second one would be timing. Now, obviously, if you pick too early, then it's going to be underweight. Maybe have poor flavor. It might be too firm, or the color is not right, or maybe there isn't even a smell, and people want a smell, an aroma. On the other hand, of course, you've got, which is probably the major issue, picking late, where you have a short shelf life. You have bruising that could occur in transport, as mentioned, and it could be too soft. The color could be wrong. And again, there could be a not very nice smell associated with it. So this is where multispectral cameras come in. And I'm going to take the opportunity now, just if I can turn my video camera around. You can have a look at a drone, which I think has been on another camera here. This is a DJI M400 RTK camera, RTK drone. It's the sort of the top of the line, really, for its application drone with a mount here where you can mount various different types of cameras. And we, of course, we specialize in multispectral cameras. So this is our RedEdge-MX camera. It's actually an old model, but it's very, very famous in its own world as being like a sort of an industry standard for multispectral analysis. It's not just the camera that goes along with the system. Also, we have something called a CRP. So it's effectively a reflectance panel, and it's a calibration standard for our cameras. And with this together with a light sensor, which checks the picture, the yaw of the drone, the direction of the sun, and the actual brightness. Together, we hope that we can get very high accuracy and high stability with our multispectral camera results. So off the back of this sort of technology, we have got a pretty good reputation in the industry for quality and reliability and accuracy. So I'll just move over. For those who don't really know, I'm just going to move on and talk about what multispectral cameras actually are. So just maybe a bit of spoilers here. A multispectral camera in our case would be, in this case, 6 cameras, but normally 5 or 4 or 3, even 3 or even 2 cameras that have got filters across them to only let in a certain wavelength of light. So when you take a photograph without one of our cameras, what you're actually doing is taking 5 or 6 images at one time that actually look like they're black and white images, and they are black and white images. They're just looking at the gain. But because there's a filter over the front of it, a piece of processing software can assume that color of that particular picture is a particular color. So you can see on there, that's our standard RedEdge-MX, RedEdge-P set of frequencies of camera. You've got a blue, a green, a red, a red edge, which is sort of the reason why we called our cameras are called RedEdge-Ps and MicaSense RedEdge cameras. And then finally, a near infrared band at the end. But if you actually apply that color filter to it, you can see there you've got a blue, well, it's actually a green, although it looks a yellow, a red, a very dark auburn color there. And then you've got, obviously, the near infrared you can't actually see in this particular case. So what you can do with that very, very simple application would be to put those 3 together, the blue and the green and the red together, and you've actually got yourself a color photograph. And obviously, our cameras are used, obviously, with taking color photographs as well as multispectral images, and it's very fine doing that way. And this just shows you the different frequencies that we're using against the background of the spectral reflectance chart. This actually shows you the amount of light that bounces off a vegetable or a piece of fruit or something like that, depending on the frequency. And you can see there, as you're moving on from left to right, that the blue color is actually absorbed a lot by the plant, a little bit less so the green. Red, again, is absorbed very heavily by the plant, and it's probably its main sort of food source for a plant. That's chlorophyll being energized by the red. But then just farther on into that red edge point, that's 668 nanometers, you suddenly got high reflectance, which means that the plant does not like that particular tone of red. And that difference between red and auburn red is one of the sort of the key techniques about multispectral cameras. And finally, you've got sort of a pretty much an infrared band at the very end there, which is like a plateau of reflectance somewhere outside of our own visual understanding in near infrared. So one of the major reasons for buying a multispectral camera is to get something called NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. And what that actually is just 2 of the 5 bands that we use, the red and the 842 nanometer infrared band. In actual fact, you don't just mix it like you do with a red RGB image. You do a small calculation in a processing software and create a normalized result of the amount of reflectance that's coming into the camera, and generate in this particular case a map of reflectance of in this particular case a field. And so you've got to the right, the middle there, and then to the right you've got NDVI maps of a field that I took here with Nordeye in December last year, looking at leeks and cabbages. The difference between the one on the left in the middle and the one on the right is simply that you were cutting out all the light from things that are not vegetables, and you're just being left there with the light that's being reflected off the vegetables, and that's really the visual impact on that, and also from taking up actual point spot numbers off the system against that calibrated against our calibration standard is how you calculate an NDVI value, and that is what really drives agronomy, precision agronomy through multispectral cameras. So, in fact, NDVI is the workhorse of multispectral cameras. It basically covers 80 or 90% of the time people use a multispectral camera, and it covers how much growth you've got, how much leaves, what area the leaves are taking up on the field, and how healthy in general the plant is. However, there's also stress, which is calculated using NDRE, which is actually, instead of having red, you would have a red edge band. So we'll move on from that really, but I think the point about that is using this, you can point out patches like you can see on the image on the right hand side. That's a deliberately left alone field. You can see patches of red there where growth is not so good, and what a farmer would do would be to approach those with either adding fertilizer or increasing irrigation, or possibly pesticides there to address the issue. So the idea is you'd pick up an image like that in early to mid-season, and then you'd use that to try and improve uniformity by making those areas of red a little bit more towards the green yellow area. The problem is saturation. So what is saturation? It's kind of like what you can see on the screen there. So if you think of NDVI, the infrared band as being the sun, and then the gentleman there at the front of the sun being the color red, which is being absorbed by the vegetable. When it gets to a very late time in harvest, just prior to harvest, the vegetable is absorbing an awful lot of red. So it's a very weak signal there, certainly compared with the near infrared in the background. So what you actually get is a very high NDVI value, somewhere between 0.9 and 1, which is the theoretical maximum. And what it actually means is you don't really get any sort of information about what you're looking at. And as a result of that, you can't tell very easily the right time to pick. So this is going specifically towards timing for picking. And because there's very little information that you can pick out from very, very mature plants, customers who have previously been using multispectral cameras either have to use different bands, like different alternatives like NDRE, or now they can look towards our green camera that we've developed to try and address this issue. And one of the issues, of course, is if they do not use a multispectral camera, then they're going back to using people doing testing on the ground, possibly with highly experienced people who maybe aren't able to go around an entire farm. So you're coming back with spot testing, and that's where uniformity gets poorer, and also you might overshoot your picking time. Okay, so I'm going to try and move on quickly as I can. We're just going to talk about the RedEdge-P Trip, the RedEdge-P Green, the RedEdge-P Dual. About 5 years ago, we released a second camera, the blue camera, which can be partnered together with the red camera. So it looks like that. And the difference between the red and the blue camera, again, is actually just simply the bands that you can use. And to be honest, today I'm not planning on talking about the RedEdge-P dual with the blue. So if you have any questions about that at the end, you can please ask me then. But just for the record, you've got a number of 5 different bands there: blue, green, red, and 2 RedEdge bands in that case. What we're really talking about is the green camera. So this is the one we released in August last year, and we actually released it with the help of Tokyo University of Agriculture and with Shizuoka University, who've been helping us sort of qualify the system and make sure it's actually effective for what it does. So we're going to go through the different bands there. But yeah, it's effectively 3 different cameras with 3 different sets of filters, and that combination of the 15 different bands allows you to get an awful lot of information, in this particular case, specific to harvest. So the green camera, rather than looking at chlorophyll better than before, which is what the red camera already does. The red camera does a very good job at just looking at chlorophyll as a general application. The idea behind the green camera is that we're starting to look at different pigments. So I'm sure even the layman would have probably heard some of these words. Carotenoids, literally like a carrot. Anthocyanins, apparently very good for you, but it's effectively like a purple you'd find in vegetables. And with these, you can look at different aspects of a plant at different times of the season. And specifically, what we're looking at with carotenoids and anthocyanins, as well as slightly tweaked chlorophylls, is that late season characterization of when senescence is going to occur, what the situation is. And you can see on the right there, carotenoids, kind of the orange, chlorophylls, the green, anthocyanins are sort of the purpley area. And then maybe the next screen is a bit better to see that. So this is just a bit of better illustration. Obviously, earlier on, when a leaf is very green, it's full of chlorophyll, so it's very green there. And we've got 2 bands there from the green camera associated with that. And then as senescence starts, the chlorophyll drops off. Behind that, you have carotenoid, which is a different style, I guess you could say, to chlorophyll, and absorbs different wavelength. And in that particular case, we're trying to use carotenoid there to measure how mature the plant is. And then finally, you've got anthocyanins that may or may not pop up in the plant, but are very useful for certain plants like red cabbage. So what we're trying to do in effect is, rather than just look at chlorophyll very, very well, which you could argue the blue is doing really, really well, we're trying to spread our bets a little bit and using 2 different types of chlorophylls, anthocyanin and carotenoid, and together with looking at it from any different directions, we're trying to home in on exactly how mature the plants are in the field. And just to show you the reasons why, we're going back to the vegetation spectral index again. It's a little bit difficult to see on this. I'll actually move on to the next one. Chlorophylls, carotenoids, anthocyanins have different reflectance values, different amount of light that reflects off them at different wavelengths. So the interesting bit for us is where chlorophyll and carotenoid have got different levels of reflectance, because that's kind of the key that we want to use to be able to qualify maturity in that highly mature plants. And guys, there's lots and lots of different applications that we've got as a result of the green camera. I am going to skip over most of them and maybe just give one example here. So this is going to be talking about carotenoid detection, but we can talk about the others at a later time. This is just homing in on carotenoids here, and specifically in the cyan band that's on the green camera. Around about 500 nanometers, literally the cyan area, you'll find that carotenoid absorbance is very high, whereas chlorophyll absorbance is relatively low. And that difference there means when you're picking up the light from that particular area, you're looking specifically at the carotenoid area, and that carotenoid chlorophyll ratio gives you a good idea, if you can maybe go on the next screen, as to how mature the crop is. This is crops that have been scanned in Japan, about an hour away from here by car, and this is rice at an experimental field at Tanazawa. I scanned with these chaps with me, and you can see this is during the course of September. We scanned some crops 3 times 8th of September, the 24th of September, and the 27th of September. And even with RGB, you can kind of see a bit of a difference there. But what we're going to show is the difference between NDVI and PSRI here. So NDVI, you still got very, very, very mature crop. You can see the difference between the NDVI and the 3 different sections here. You can see a difference. It ain't that good. And also at that point, NDVI is already dropping, but it's still saturated. So we're not getting fantastically good results there. Whereas with PSRI, it's designed to look at the ratio between carotenoid, which you can start to see specifically on that right-hand side picture, and chlorophyll, and this balance. And it's much better suited there to homing in on the level of maturity there, and then choosing the right specific day that you want for that crop to pick it. This is just going into a few details here, but it can show here that the jump from the 24th to the 27th, just 3 days, is pretty huge there for PSRI. It shows a very, very strong indicator that immediately when it's time to start picking, you really know about it with PSRI. And PSRI is an index which is, I think, unique to this camera in the multispectral camera world. Just a little bit more detail there. I'm not going to go into the detail, but we can do if you'd like to. So I'm sort of actually wrapping up now, but I just want to let you know that senescence and maturity and when it's time to harvest is not actually that easy a subject. So different crops have different requirements for when you want to harvest. And I'm sure there's a lot of professionals here that already understand this, but for the record, pre-senescence crops, climacteric fruits, for example, like bananas or certain types of mangoes, I believe, they can be picked before senescence start, when it's very, very hard, but it's just at a particular point. You can pick it and you can take it and stick it in a warehouse. And then when the time is right and you want to sell that to the customer, to the supermarket or something like that, you can actually gas it with ethylene, and that will artificially induce maturity. So you can actually generate the sugars in there to have a nice product there. So it's a relatively easy thing to look after. However, you still need to pick the right time to pick it. And in this particular case, I'm just listing up there some of the applications and some of the indices that we've got to be able to do that. So NDVI is something we've had a look at, and we've switched from NDVI looking at just general chlorophyll, specifically to NDVI looking at chlorophyll-A. And chlorophyll-A is the more dominant and the faster to of the two chlorophyll, the main chlorophylls, it's the faster to drop at the time of senescence. PSRI is, again, we just talked about that. It's that ratio between carotenoid and chlorophyll. And PRI is a very special carotenoid called xanthophyll, which is actually something which can react within about a couple of hours of stress. So those three combining together are applications that you can get just with the green camera and the blue camera, I believe. And then chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, we've not discussed it in detail here, but with the blue camera specifically fixed at the red band, which is the maximum amount of minimum amount of reflectance for chlorophyll B, and the new green camera fixed at chlorophyll A, the ratio between chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B is another really, really strong indicator of the level of maturity of the plant. So chlorophyll A-B ratio, you should expect B to be the ratio to be relatively high, but then it starts to drop as chlorophyll B starts converting itself to chlorophyll A as senescence starts and starts to pick up speed. So chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B ratio is something that's not available in any other thing other than the hyperspectral cameras, and now the blue and green cameras together. And then finally ARI, again looking specifically at anthocyanins. Early and mid senescence would be more crops such as wheat, pumpkins, and other crops there, where you're actually thinking about, okay, it's started to senesce, but the fruit or whatever you're trying to pick there is still gaining weight. So you're trying to improve the amount of yield, literally the amount of tonnage you're trying to pick up. but also things like pumpkins. You can't sell pumpkins when they're green. They have to turn a bit orange, which is literally senescing, because the sugars are building up there and it becomes a more attractive fruit. And again, strawberries or something like that, where you're looking at pinpointing a specific point. With these particular crops, you are not able to gas them with ethylene to improve maturity. You have to pick them and you have to get them to the supermarket as soon as possible before they start to rot. So in this particular case, you really need to be on the ball with your harvesting. And then finally, looking at late senescence. So this is a bit more complicated, but again, similar sort of applications that's available with the green and the triple cameras. In this particular case, you may understand Riesling wine has 9 different varieties of wine, Riesling types, but it's simply based on the time when you pick a Riesling grape. So you might have very early pre-senescence grapes for a very dry, maybe even bitter taste, whereas you've got the very sweet Rieslings there that have maybe some rot at the end of it and might be picked up until about November, December. And in those late senescence ones where you're looking for a very sweet wine, you'd be looking to characterize the vineyard and the leaves in the vineyard well into a point when you'd consider the grapes to have gone off. This is just an example, just to round you off, guys. Around an example of a vineyard that I visited in Brescia in Italy with the green camera and the blue and the red cameras, and we scanned a vineyard there. It was actually in July, so it wasn't actually senescence time then. What we want to show you is a couple of different indices that we took with the site. And the most important thing here is what we're looking for is different results from NDVI. NDVI has a lot of different types of variants on it, but what you're looking for is different types of information. That different types of information is those different types of arrows looking at different things related to the plant. So in this case, NDVI is there, NDRE, which is looking more at stress, and that can be done with just the red camera. And then we're moving on to the PSRI function, where you can see, the green rather than the red and the yellow are showing green. It means it doesn't need to be picked yet. So red and the orange are saying it's starting to senesce. So you can see there's a big difference between the data. And then finally, PRI is another different type of node that you can go and have a look at the item, look at the vineyard, and again showing very, very different information. And that's literally the ability to deal with light stress. But it's also a nice measure of how healthy the plant is. Just wrapping up now, guys, but just to say, with the 3 different cameras together, we've got 15 bands, and you're starting to move from multispectral to what we are calling superspectral. And that's starting to move into the sort of area where people are buying hyperspectral cameras at the moment. Now, hyperspectral cameras are absolutely fantastic pieces of kit. They have maybe hundreds of bands available for really, really in-depth analysis of what you want to look at on a field. Very, very good things. Expensive and a bit arguably quite heavy, but absolutely fantastic as a research tool. However, with the RedEdge-P triple, while you can't do very deep analysis, we like to think that you can do a lot of different interesting things with the RedEdge-P triple, which almost replace the hyperspectral camera. We have better spatial resolution. We're taking images in a slightly easier, more robust way. It's a lighter, cheaper product to sell, to buy, and it's produces reasonably good results in terms of things like hyperspectral cameras have been used for, like disease ID, species ID, pest ID, and things like that. So in this particular case, it's actually not agriculture. This is environmental monitoring for the Shizuoka University, and we're IDing different types of trees in an alpine forest. So, guys, a little bit late. Sorry about the delay, but have you guys got any questions?
I know that there is a question in the chat, so maybe you want to answer the chat question first, and then we can get participants to kind of lift their hand, and we can do questions that way.
Okay. That sounds great. Let me just, I'm just going to switch off my sharing if you don't mind, so I can see it. Thank you. Chat, yes. Let me see. Would it work for date palm in the Middle East? Okay, well, I don't have an awful lot of experience with date palms. However, I suspect it's like a citrus tree, and it's probably an evergreen tree. And so the basic answer would be yes, it probably does work very well. But I would probably say maybe an index like PRI would be excellent for something like that, where you're not necessarily looking at the allowance of green, you're looking at carotenoid content, you're looking at xanthophyll content. And maybe that would be a great way to see what you're looking for. It would be interesting to understand whether you're interested in stress detection or you're looking at senescence. But yeah, PRI would be a really good application for citrus, and we've been looking at citrus, so I think it's probably analogous. Yeah. Where the space between the trees is around 8 to 10 meters. That sounds fine. I mean, I think the main thing is you probably use analysis software to identify the tree. So something like a Pix4D Fields would probably be able to pick out the palm tree there, or Agisoft Metashape be able to pick out the palm tree there. So you're just looking at the fronds of the tree. And I think you could probably use PRI or possibly GNDVI to qualify maturity and health. So yes. Any other questions, guys? Yes. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much. One of the important compounds for the plant defenses are flavonoids, but these are absorbed in UVA. What is the current development of multispectral camera to monitor in UVA?
I'm not sure about UVA. If you're talking about like well below 400 nanometers outside of visual expert range, we're not working on it right now, or at least I believe we're not working. They won't tell me if we were. We do have anthocyanin specific indices now. I'm not sure if you're aware of the ARI, but ARI would be looking at 550 nanometers, like maximal reflectance green, is that right? And 705. So with the green camera, we're able to qualify that, and because we've brought in the frequency width to quite a narrow region, we believe we can get some pretty good results. But specifically to UAVA, I haven't got anything to tell you, I'm afraid. I can show you some stuff about ARI if you'd like to, but yeah.
Yeah, usually ARI are proxy of also other flavonoids which are absorbing in UVA, but it's not directly related. So therefore, it will be useful to have also UVA camera.
Yeah. No, I understand absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the idea of putting a something in the other direction down into the UVA band. If there's a requirement for it, then we'd certainly be interested in talking to you about it. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I haven't spoken about that because things get quite complicated. But with our latest cameras, we have something called a panchromatic band. So this one in the middle here. So what we tried to do, because we're thinking about the way a customer is operating, if you have 5 megapixels in each one of those bands, you get an awful lot of data bloat really, really quickly. What we actually have is 1.6 megapixel bands in the spectral bands, and we have in this particular case a 5 megapixel band in the center, which is not looking at any type of frequency at all. It picks up everything from 400 to 900 nanometers. So then what you do with processing software like Pix4D or Agisoft Metashape, you'd use the panchromatic band to pan sharpen the images. So you can get, yes, certainly you can get a 5 megapixel spatial resolution image, or a 12 megapixel spatial resolution image, but with relatively small amount of data taken up on your SD card. So yes, I think you can get high resolution RGB imagery suitable. And I would just say as well, there's lots of 40 megapixel cameras and 60 megapixel cameras available, and we're only talking about 12 megapixel in our case. We're actually talking about single dots of 12 megapixel rather than each one as being 3 different colors. So if you think about it, we're actually quite high in resolution. Although it's only 12 meg, only sounds quite low. It's not bad actually as a high resolution image I'm taking with an Alton PT. So I hope that answers your question. Thanks. Any more questions, guys? If anyone wants to delve into more deeply into some of the indices we've got, I can do that. I've got some probably quite boring graphs and charts that we've made, but do kind of prove out what we've done. Yes, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about senescence and how we hope that we can sort of help revolutionize the industry, not just for agriculture research, but also for sort of pros as well, that would be great. Okay, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.